We're back for the last hour of Disaster Week here on iThemes Training. We're talking all about clients today and how to package and price and create care plan services for your clients using iThemes Security Pro and our other iThemes products. So great first hour. Thanks everybody for wonderful questions. We'll have another good time of Q&A as we wrap up today as well. But in this last hour, we're going to be talking about how to actually set up our care plans using iThemes products. So I've been using iThemes Security Pro, Backup Buddy for years and years and years. And we're going to talk about how to set all those things up to manage your client sites. And by the way, all of these products are on sale right now in the sidebar beside the chat room. You'll see links to purchase those. Or you can buy our plugin suite at 40% off. It includes all the plugins. And also the WordPress Toolkit is the best way to get everything iThemes offers, all the plugins, as well as everything in the Cadence theme as well. That's included in the Web Design Toolkit and Premium iThemes Training membership as well in that toolkit. So good stuff. Everything's included. And let's get started, shall we? So let's talk about how to set up our care plan. So we've gotten out of packaging and selling. If you have questions lingering about those, I'll catch those at the very end of this hour in our wrap-up Q&A. But in this session specifically, we're going to be talking about, honestly, it's the settings that I use when I'm setting up client sites. So frequently on webinars, I get asked, well, what settings do you use? And so this is what we're going to talk about today. So it's all about process. If you're going to be managing websites for clients, it's important to create a process and a checklist so you know that your work is consistent from site to site. Because if you're trying to rely on your memory to do everything on every site the same, you're just probably going to forget something. Like I forget things all the time. It's pretty sad. It's worse as I'm getting older. And I live and die by checklists. And having a good system where you use the same tools in the same way, and you're using all the settings are similar. Having consistency in your recurring revenue is so important, and in your WordPress care plans. So creating this system is absolutely critical. And again, the practices explained in this webinar are my own. Okay, this is what I do. They are not necessarily endorsed by iThemes. You can certainly ask questions. And if you have specific product-related questions, the support team is great. But I'm just telling you what I do. And what I'm doing here is free as part of this webinar for educational purposes, no guarantees. This is just what I do. And a lot of folks have found it helpful to understand that. Okay. All right, let's move on down and talk about the first question here. This always comes up when we start talking about getting a site ready for the client and launching a site. Should you give a client administrator access? And there's lots of different opinions on this. Some folks believe that only the developer should have admin access to prevent a client from breaking the site. Others believe that clients should have administrator access. But, I believe it's just a matter of principle that the client owns the website and the client should have access to an administrator user. Now, that is worded very carefully, okay? The client should have access to an administrator user. Should the client log in as an administrator every time? Probably not. But I've had enough cases of rescue websites where the client comes to us and the developer has vanished into thin air, and only the developer had the keys to the to the WordPress install and the hosting platform and all that. And the poor client is just out blowing in the wind. Like they have no access, they can't do anything, and then we have to untangle that mess. So I resolved years ago not to be that kind of developer. And so we give our clients an administrator login, but it's like, break glass in case of emergency. If for some reason we, are destroyed, something happens and we're gone, you have the ability to access your website. So typically, I create an editor user for the client for normal website access and updating of the content. And actually, it's in the contract that if the client uses their administrator login and break the site, the work used to restore the site is billable. So do not log in as an administrator just to knock around inside the site. It's really easy to track client activity using iThemes Security user logging. That gives you a lot of information just bundled right there in iThemes Security. And Michael talked a lot about the logs yesterday for tracking hack attempts. And as soon as I locate here it is, the other window here, iThemes Security also has user logging. Let me get my Windows positioned correctly. All right, so if we go to all events, and if we go down to user logging and hit filter, you will see, look, all the things that I've done. Like I deleted a bunch of plugins and so forth. So we get a good, when I logged in and so forth. So we get good user logging. Now, if you want even more user logging, there is a fantastic plugin that we talked about in my plugin roundup. I think it was the last time or the time before last. Maybe in January, I forget. It was within the last couple of months. It is called Stream, and it is fantastic. And let me find it. So if you are, especially if you have clients that log in and edit the content of your website, this is a fantastic tool if you want to log what they're doing. So what Stream does, and notice this is very similar information to what iThemes Security gave us, but this is why I like Stream. You can set an alert. So for example, somebody asked either yesterday or Tuesday whether, is there a way we could get alerted if a client logs into the website? Yes, right here. So here's an alert that says when this user, test admin, which would be like the admin address that you give to the client, you can leave this part blank. So if this user logs in, send an email to a recipient. So it can email you if that client logs in as their administrator. Isn't that cool? It can also, this is great. It can also send, if you're using Slack, it can send a Slack message, or this is what's a lot of fun. And we talked about this in our plugin roundup. It can send an IFT notification. So if you're using IFT, which is if this, then that, it can do all sorts of things. Like if you could attach it to a smart light switch and have it turn on a light for things. Anyhow, this is a great way to know if your clients are doing something on the website. So I just mentioned that briefly as an aside, and I've skipped down my handout. Let's see here. Sorry, I don't mean to make everybody busy by scrolling. That's the Stream plugin. It's really helpful if you have clients who are doing things on the website. Let's see. Heather's asking, how heavy is that plugin? So right, it is a user log, and so it depends on how much access the site has, right? So for most of my sites, they're very low. Yeah, they're smallish sites. I'm not sure I'd want 60 days of logs on a very high traffic membership site, people logging in and out and doing those things. I'm not sure I'd want that, but you can set those logs accordingly. Okay. Let's roll into how do you set up iThemes Security for client sites. So my first recommendation is we need to look at the iThemes Security settings and determine which are the best for your clients in your specific situation. Now, I'm not going to have time to get into all of the granular details of iThemes Security. We have spent way over an hour before doing just that. And there is a great webinar called the iThemes Security 7 Premier event. You can click that link and it goes through and walks you through the setup wizard for iThemes Security, as well as many of the features in iThemes Security. You can also find excellent documentation for iThemes Security in our help center. And so those links are provided there for you. So the iThemes Security onboarding wizard is something that's brand new with iThemes Security 7. The point of this, Timothy and Michael did a great job of reaching the goal that we want you to be able to secure your website without having to be a security expert, right? And so iThemes Security in the onboarding wizard asks a series of questions the first time that plugin is installed and activated on your website to set the common settings that you would want. Now, if you ever want to rerun the onboarding wizard, there is a magic link right here. Now, there's not any place in the UI that's going to give you this link, so this is your special treat for coming to this webinar. It's a secret link. So just replace mydomain.com with your domain name and all of this. And this tells iThemes Security to run the setup wizard again if you, for whatever reason, want to rerun the onboarding wizard. So I'm going to walk through the settings, and I've got, this is wpnathan.com, the demo site that we use for my webinars here on iThemes Training. And I have iTheme Security set up with the typical settings I use for client sites. And I'm just going to walk through and show those. But I have set this up as an export. So if you want to download the settings as you're going to see them, as I walk through them in just a minute, you can just download and uncompress this file. That's going to give you a JSON file that you can then import into iTheme Security right here, settings, and go down here to exports, and then import. And you can upload that file right here, and it will drop it in there. Okay, so again, yeah, don't use this link. You need to replace mydomain.com with whatever your domain name is, right? Dave, this is we are using the pro version of iTheme Security here for this. And I don't know, Kristen, maybe you can tell, or if there's anybody from iTheme Security, is the import-export part of the free plugin or not? I don't know the answer to that question. So if one of y'all could answer in the chat, that would be great. Only in Pro. Okay, so import-export is a Pro feature. Okay. So let's just walk through the settings, and I'll show you what I do. Again, these are the settings that I use. May or may not be endorsed by iThemes. This is just what I do, okay? So let's go back to our, so first of all, the dashboard. There is a basic iTheme Security dashboard that I've set up with what I think are the most popular areas that clients might want to see if they're going to look at this. And so this is just a basic dashboard with those important things. You can edit that, change it around. Again, not trying to explain the dashboard here, but there is a basic dashboard that I've called default, which is I know is a highly creative name. And it is accessible to editors and administrators of the site. So I give clients an editor user so they would be able to see this dashboard if they wanted to. So that is, by the way, this dashboard is part of that export file. So let's go on down in here to settings, and I'll just basically walk you through how I have this set up. Now, I didn't turn on two-factor because you don't want to export those settings. That's something you're going to want to set up on the site after you import things. So you can decide how you want to use two-factor. I, like many of you, struggle getting clients to use two-factor authentication. It is complicated, and I understand that, and I wish we could all wave a magic wand and have people use two-factor, but it just doesn't happen that way. Passwordless login, again, I've left all of these off for now. These are going to apply to your situation. Passwordless login is super helpful, especially like for membership sites and so forth. People can log in by just clicking a link in an email that is sent to them. And then trusted devices I have off as well. It does work really well, though. So in the lockout section, all the banned users is turned on, and all of the options are checked here. Local brute force. These are all the default settings, or you can grab those from the import. Now, one thing I will say about this API key. I learned something recently that I didn't know before, even having been an iTheme Security user for many years. And by the way, any of you folks that are going to try to hack my API key, I'm going to reset this after the webinar is over because I know you people. So you can actually use the same API key on multiple sites. So you can, if you have an API key set up, you don't have to put your email address in every time. That's what I'm trying to say. You can use the same API key from site to site. It's going to work fine. And then you've got your reCAPTCHAs as well. I use reCAPTCHA v3, and I use it on all the places and include the script on all pages unless there's some reason you don't want to do that. It makes it a lot more effective. All right, so the site check. This is the spot where you can exclude files, and these windows are normally side by side, but I'm zoomed in, so they're stacking. In my default settings, I have excluded the directory where Backup Buddy backups live. A lot of times you'll get file change warnings when Backup Buddy is running because it's adding files to the WordPress install. So I will typically exclude the file folder area of Backup Buddy from the iTheme Security file change warnings. So that's the only change there. And then version management. This is my favorite feature of iTheme Security. I don't use it. Actually, I have for WP Nathan. iTheme Security is updating all the themes and plugins automatically. But in the export, this is actually turned off. But here's that beautiful setting. My favorite single setting in iTheme Security is this auto update if fixes vulnerability. So as we scan for vulnerabilities, if that patch exists, when the site scanner finds a vulnerability, it will automatically apply it. I love that setting. It's a wonderful thing. All right, so let's look at lockouts. Let's see, we did site check and utility, so that's all set up. We've gone through all of this. In the user groups, so I have a couple of groups set up, administrators, editors, and everybody else. So typically, many of the sites we use are brochure sites. If we have a site where there's going to be customers or members logging in, we'll just add a new user group, but basically set up for administrators and editors. And for administrators, a little more secure. We're requiring strong passwords, refuse the compromised passwords. This is the Have I Been Pwned feature that we've talked about before. And then we're going to track their activity. For editors, similar settings. For everybody else, we're only using the refuse compromised passwords. Let's see here. Here under configure, we've gone through these already. And under advanced. So all the boxes I typically tweak under system tweaks, those are all checked. Under WordPress tweaks, we disable XML RPC, we restrict the REST API, and we disable the user archives. I've had problems with clients in this setting, so I typically leave this off. That's just me. I mean, there's value to this setting, but it sometimes, like if the client doesn't fill in a nickname in their profile, then it will not let you save the profile. So that I found to be problematic with clients, so I just leave that one off. So those are the settings I use there. And somebody had a question yesterday or Tuesday about the hide the back end, like rename WP admin to something else. You can do that here, but it's really not an effective method of security for WordPress. It used to be, people used to do that, security by obscurity. These days, it's 2022, the URL doesn't matter. It's better to protect your admin login with other things. Okay, that's basically all the settings. They are there in the JSON file when you download that. Let me pause for a minute. Any specific questions about any of that stuff I was just blowing through right there? Notifications. Thank you, Sue. I went straight down this list and left off notifications. Okay, so thank you. Let's talk about that, shall we? I typically don't. So by default, it might send to all administrator users. I don't want my client getting security notices. So if you have a ticket system, this is a great place. Maybe you could send your notifications into a ticket system or to you or whatever. But here is the most important thing about notifications. Whatever email address you have in the from needs to be at the same domain where the site lives. Let me say that again. The email address in the from under notifications needs to be at the same domain where the site lives. This email address does not exist, and it doesn't matter that it doesn't exist. But if I was going to say this from Nathan at iThemes.com, when iThemes Security tries to send an email from an address at iThemes.com, that's essentially email spoofing, because this website does not have permission to send email from iThemes.com. So it needs to match the domain name. Even if this email address doesn't exist, it needs to match. So it can be like Melanie is saying in the chat. It can be a no reply, whatever, website at, whatever you want to call it. It just needs to be from the same domain name as the website. Now, this defaults to the WordPress default. So if you, like me, have your email address as what's here under settings and general, this is going to be, if you don't change this notification email, iThemes Security is going to try to send from the WordPress administrator address, like most plugins do. So just make sure that any plugin, iThemes Security included, that is trying to send email from your administrator email address, whatever email address that is, it needs to match the domain name of the website. Otherwise, it's going to end up in the spam folder. Okay, does that make sense? Sal, how do you avoid iTheme security sending emails to clients? Right here. Like right here, the only notification that anybody's ever going to get from iTheme security is going to me on this site, right there. That's it. The question you asked is the purpose of the notification center. Now, we're going to look at each of these notification types in a second. A bunch of questions coming in here. Let's see. All right, Mr. Anderson. So when you set up 2 accounts for the user, an admin and editor, do you ever hear they just have 1 email? Yeah. So it for the client who, yes, we're going to set up 2 users. So they have to give us 2 different email addresses because WordPress needs a separate email address per user. So they could either create an alias or use a separate email address. Sue, is making the reports editable on the roadmap? That's a great question. Maybe Kristen can speak to that. Any questions about notifications that I've missed? Sal, how do you stop clients from receiving marketing email from iThemes? Well, I mean, they would have had to subscribe to the email list, right? Maybe Kristen, if you could speak to that, that'd be great. Frank, why disable 2FA on export? I just turn on, again, this is just my process, but if we're going to use 2FA, I turn that on when we get ready to launch the site. And I didn't want to have that setting enabled in the export file that I gave you. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So under notifications, these are the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different kinds of notifications that iTheme Security will send. So I have this set to do a weekly security digest. You can make it weekly, daily. And here's where you just want to make sure that all of these, unless for some reason you don't want it this way, all of your recipients should be the default recipients, which I have currently set to me. So with that, if I have default recipient is just me, and then all of my notifications are either turned off or set to default recipients, I'm the only person who ever is going to get email from iTheme Security. Does that make sense? So iTheme Security is going to send email to whoever you tell it to. All right, so site lockout, I have that disabled. I don't want to know if anybody's locked out. Like if I'm under attack, I'm going to get a security digest to let me know. File change warning enabled here to me. The settings export email, nothing really to change there. The magic links, nothing to change there. These are all transactional when someone requests something. Site scan goes to me. 2-factor is transactional. Inactive users I have disabled. And then the automatic updates I have disabled as well. You can enable that if you want to. Okay. Does that make sense? Thank you for reminding me, Sue. I left out a gigantic part of the iTheme security settings there. Okay, any other questions about the notification settings? Sal, why would iTheme Security Pro not send magic links? You have to turn it on. Let's see. Yeah, it has to be on. As long as it's on, it will send those. Okay, let's move on. So here are a few settings that you might want to change from the import. You might want to tweak my basic security dashboard. You might want to create your own. I think that was a copy and paste error. Sorry about that. Add your IP address to the list of authorized hosts at Configure Global Settings. Create that API key, and you can use that API key on multiple sites, as I mentioned. The from email and notification center, we talked about that. And then create your own export to save it and import it later. Now, if you are doing as I recommend, which is building all of your projects from a starter site, you can do all these settings in your starter site's iTheme security plugin, and it's just there. So every time you replicate that site, it's there. Now, there are a few settings that you might want to change when you launch the site. This is a big one, especially if you are using a starter site. We talked about this in the course at the end of last year where I taught about that, but change the salts. So the salts are basically a bunch of characters that are used for the encryption key for your site. They live in the WP config file, but iTheme Security gives you a really easy way to change those without having to go into WP config. You can do that here under Tools and Change WordPress Salts and click that button, and that will automatically refresh your salts. This is important especially if you're using a starter site, because if you're duplicating your site, then you're using the same salts on every website, and that's just not a good idea. So at launch, we're going to refresh the salts. The other thing, the helpful thing about salts is if you've ever been hacked, if you click this, you can refresh your salts. That logs everybody out of the site immediately, right then. Or if for some reason you need to log everybody out of the site for some reason, refresh the salts right here with this tool, and that's going to log everybody out. You'll also want to generate new keys for reCAPTCHA. Deal with any, if you want to update automatically any themes or plugins, you can do that at Site Check and Version Management. Make sure your permissions are all green on your file permissions. I'm curious to see if they are on this one. That's here again under Tools. We'll run that. Oh, I got a couple problems. They're not big problems, but these are, the values are not as they should be. And if you know how to fix those values, you can do that in SSH Editor or the File Manager in cPanel, or you can just ask your web host to do that if there's a problem. These are the values iTheme Security recommends. Okay, so that's it for iTheme Security. Any other questions or comments about that before I move on to Backup Buddy? And curtains, that's exactly right. Those warnings show up. The host might, like, for example, this is a Liquid Web VPS that I'm on, this test server, and it defaults the public HTML folder to 750 instead of 755. It's not really a problem, but it's not what iTheme Security recommends. Okay, anything specifically about iTheme Security? Mr. Anderson, for site scans, you get notifications every time plugins get updated. Oh, that's such a great question. And I'm going to cover that in a minute. I'm going to answer that question in a minute. Sue, the green and the orange, so every one of them should be the same. So you want green on everything, ideally. I mean, this one here is not a huge deal. These ones, I'm not sure why those are those permissions. They really need to be 444, which is locked down completely. That's something I'm going to check after we're done today. Not sure why those are those values. Okay. Okay, let's move on into Backup Buddy. And so I've been using Backup Buddy for client sites since, no kidding, like 2010. So 12 plus years of using Backup Buddy for client sites. I love it. I use it at various stages of our process, migrating sites to live, backing them up. It's a fantastic, fantastic tool for all of those things. If you want a full explanation of Backup Buddy settings, great Help Center article here. But here's what I've learned. If you are ever having issues with Backup Buddy working correctly, it's virtually always a hosting issue. On a good server with good horsepower and system resources, Backup Buddy just runs great. It doesn't have any problem at all with the default settings. If you're on a really El Cheapo shared hosting platform, you might have issues with Backup Buddy running. And it usually is a problem because there aren't enough server resources to actually zip a file. The server just is too weak to do that. Let's see, Curtains, are you on Backup Buddy support? Yeah, Curtains is on Backup Buddy support. And if you have specific questions, he'll ask you there. He'll answer those for you there in the chat. But the beautiful thing about Backup Buddy, it's been around for so long, and the iTheme security team, iTheme's Backup Buddy team has such a history of supporting Backup Buddy for all these years that there's so many granular settings that they can frequently help you out, even in the worst of hosting situations. But by the way, this is a good reason to have your own hosting platform for clients so that you don't run into issues. So here's my website backup strategy. I mentioned it briefly in the last hour, but with Backup Buddy, we run a full site backup every day on every site that we manage. Full site backup. Now, there are, I think in the docs for Backup Buddy, it says maybe do a database backup every day and a full backup every week. That's fine. The reason I do a full site backup every day is that if something happens to the site, I want a very quick path to restoring the site, which means I don't want to have to go grab a full backup with all the files and restore that, and then go grab a database backup with the database and restore that. I want a full site backup every day. Now, the downside to that is a lot of sites are backing up every day, and there's a lot of things that are being backed up. So if your server doesn't have the resources to do that, it can become a problem, and you might need to just do a database backup daily. But my server is fine. It does full backup. That's what we do. So because of its low cost, for many years, I used and recommended Amazon S3 as a remote destination. So Backup Buddy has the ability to connect to multiple destinations, lots of different kinds here. Let me just pull that screen up. So here are all of our options. We do have a Backup Buddy stash, which I'll talk about in just a minute. There's S3, there's Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, and even SFTP. If you want to back up to a remote server location, you can do that. You can even email a backup, especially if it's a small database backup. You can do that. And there's some legacy ones down here as well. Now, those are all the options. There's lots of them. So you want to back up the site daily, or, well, let me say this. I back up the site daily, full backup, and I ship them off to a remote destination. And then I delete the local copy of the backup. So for years, I used Amazon S3. I now use Dropbox because it got to the point, like early on when I didn't have a lot of backups, Amazon S3 was cheap. Like, good grief. It was $5, $6 a month for all the backups, even when I was keeping a 30-day archive. But I got to a point where I was spending well over $200 a year for Amazon S3 storage space, which again is not a lot when you think about it. But I then began to investigate Dropbox. At a $200 a year professional tier, I found something very interesting about Dropbox. They give you access to deleted files for 6 months. 6 months, which means if you were to look at I'm not going to open up my Dropbox right now because it's got client information, but you would see in our Dropbox a folder for every site that we manage. And if you went into that folder, you would see 3 zip files of the last 3 backups that were made. But you can click the show deleted files button and go back 6 months of history of backups on that site. And then you can tell it to restore that deleted file and then download it and restore it. It's wonderful. So for less money than I was paying for Amazon S3, I have Dropbox with 180 days of history of backups. It's pretty nifty. Okay, let me scroll back up and catch some questions. Cheryl has a specific error message. Curtains, maybe I'd default to you for that one. Or Cheryl, that's a great question for support. Stacy is asking, are you also using Liquid Web cPanel backups? Yes. So like I mentioned in the last hour, we have a server level backup that happens at the Liquid Web data center that backs up everything in their data center. But I also want a backup that I control that's outside of the Liquid Web environment, that's in external cloud storage just in case. Mr. Anderson, what do you do if it's an e-commerce site with new orders? That's a great question. You might have multiple backups, database backups happening every day. And with Backup Buddy, you can schedule those. So if we add a schedule, you can have it backing up every hour if you want a database backup and push that backup off to cloud storage. Let's see. Sue is asking about Backup Buddy deployment. That is beyond the context of this webinar. It's a feature that it's been around a long time, but not well used. And there are webinars out there if you want to search the archives. Stacy, do you manually delete local backups every day? No. So when you set up a schedule in Backup Buddy, you can add a remote destination and then check this box, delete the local backup after remote send. So as part of the backup process every day in the schedule, it backs up the file it sends it over to Dropbox, and when that send reports that it's completed, Backup Buddy deletes the local file. Peter, is Backup Buddy fully compatible with PHP 8? I know they're working on that. Let's see. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Any other questions about Backup Buddy? All right. So here is my Backup Buddy setup process. So first, I'm going to create that remote destination, and then set the number of backups according to your strategy. So that's really easy to do here under Destinations. Click Add New. That's where we just were a second ago. Select the destination. Now here's a little tip. Okay, for my setup, I use the Dropbox V2 destination because V3 is preferred. V2 is down here under Legacy. I realize this says Legacy, but if you have backups that are large, like a few hundred megabytes, I have found that the V3, just by nature of the way that API works, is less reliable than the Legacy V2. There's no plans for V2 to go away that I'm aware of. Curtains if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this is way more reliable in my experience than the V3. So just take that for what it's worth. And I will make one change here, which I can't do without attaching it. So I'm not going to do that. But under the advanced settings of my V2, if you're going to use Dropbox V2 like I'm doing, then I set the maximum chunk at 200 megabytes under advanced settings. So that's based on, again, my own trial and error. This is not iThemes recommended. This is Nathan's own trial and error. Okay, so take it for what it's worth. You can also set up Stash Live if you want to. Stash Live is a remote destination. It basically is a live backup of your site. It's really helpful for e-commerce sites or sites that have transactional things happening, membership sites. It keeps an ongoing backup whenever you upload a file or somebody posts something. That triggers Stash Live to create a backup. It's really helpful. Something else that's really cool about Stash Live scans the files for malware at the file level. So it might also be a good upgrade to a care plan. Like if a client has a big site and they want real-time malware scanning, Stash Live will let you know if it finds malware on the site right away. It's pretty cool. Okay, so once you set it up, make sure you do a full backup of the website, send it to the remote destination, and verify that it arrived. Very important. Create a schedule so that the backup happens on a daily schedule, sent to a remote destination, and delete the local backup when it's sent. So those are the things I just showed a second ago under schedules. When you add a new one, give it a name. What kind of backup is it? Once daily. Add the remote destination, and then delete it once it successfully sends. All right. So a couple of notes here. If you're using a starter site, here's what I do on the starter site. I'm not going to take time to go through that just for the sake of time. And this is a little nugget that I stored years ago when I had a situation with a client who was on really, really, really bad shared hosting. And there are very few times that I've found that these settings don't work for low-powered hosting environments. So this came from Backup Buddy support years ago. And those are the settings. And so it kind of throttles back the way Backup Buddy creates a zip, and it will work in many cases when the default settings don't work in low-powered hosting situations. So that's just a little freebie I'm throwing in here. Okay, one extra thing here that a lot of folks aren't aware of. There are some really cool things underneath Backup Buddy diagnostics, which I'm just going to click through really quick because I'm running out of time and I want to have time for Q&A. And I'm waiting. So lots of neat tools under Backup Buddy Diagnostics, starting off with server information. Gives you an at-a-glance look at all the things on the server, different versions of things, what the database is, your PHP, all these things, how much memory WordPress actually sees. It's a ton of information here about the environment that Backup Buddy is running. in, and that's really helpful. Like I will look at this diagnostics page when I'm evaluating a site that we didn't build, or if it's on a hosting platform that we don't control. This is a great at a glance look to see if there's any problems, because you get a pass fail warning over here in the status. So just clicking right across here under database, you get a view of all of the different tables in the database. You can actually repair the database table right here as well. It's a pretty cool little tool there. This is also a super helpful tool under sitemaps. If you have a backup that is stalling, maybe it's gigantic, and that's the reason. There's a really cool interactive site size map here that shows you the size. Like my site is 725 megabytes. It's mostly in WP content. There's a lot of plugins. I can click into this, and it will expand that out and show me all the different pieces of the site. It's really, really cool and helpful. I use this a lot of times to diagnose what in the world is going on in the media folder to make it so big. So it's really, really helpful. Let's see. If we had some conversation about the WordPress cron, this will show you what's happening in the WordPress cron right here under the cron tab. The recent actions show you a history of the things that have happened recently in Backup Buddy. That's pretty cool. Same here for activity, just a little more granular. Also, this is there is a malware scan tab. What this does, Backup Buddy asks the Sucuri site scanner to scan the site, and it will let you know under this tab if, you know, is the site clean or not. But this is an external scan from the Sucuri scanner. It's not an internal file level scan. Now, the last thing here is under logs and other. And there's some things here that you probably shouldn't click unless you know what you're doing. But there's two buttons that I want to bring up. The first is this clean up old temp data, perform daily housekeeping. If you've had a bunch of failed backups in a row and Backup Buddy feels kind of like it's stalling out, I'll click this sometimes because it goes through and cleans out any temporary files that exist and gives you like a fresh start, you know, cleans out any failed backups and stuff. Yeah, it's really helpful. The other thing is this one right here. Like if I'm having trouble with Backup Buddy sending a file to the remote destination, I'll click this force cancel of backups and transfers. So if there are any stalled backups that are just stalled like forever, or a transfer that's trying to transfer and it's not working, you can click that and it just sort of resets all of that. So use these with care. Sometimes support will ask you to click those things, but they're really helpful. All right. I'm going to scroll through all this because I just talked about it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with iThemes Sync. Adding a site to iThemes Sync as your dashboard is super helpful. I think I'll just add a site really quickly. Sign into iThemes Sync. We have a recent webinar on iThemes Sync that goes through all of the different settings. But it allows, iThemes Sync, of course, is a dashboard that allows you to update all of your client sites from one centralized place. Uh-oh, I'm logged into the wrong user. Okay, I'm logged into the wrong user. It's going to be a problem if I try to go other places. Anyhow, iThemes Sync does a great job of keeping all your sites in one spot. It sends reports to your clients about plugins that happen, and it can also give Google Analytics results. It does a lot of things. You can also hide menu items from the client there as well. Now, let's move on into this last bit. I'm sorry I'm rushing through this for the sake of time. I want to have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. Here is, I believe, someone asked earlier, what is my recommended update strategy? Like, how often are we updating themes and plugins in core WordPress? And I mentioned in the last hour, we do that weekly, but here's the trick. We try to do it at the same time each week. Now, for years, that's been on Sunday nights. It's a low traffic time. And, you know, whenever you do it, the reason that I suggest doing your themes and plugin updates at the same time every week is that if you're running file change notifications, if you're updating all your sites at the same time, and you get file change notifications, well, that's expected because you're updating themes and plugins. But, and if you're only doing them, let's say on Sunday nights, well, if I start to get file change notifications outside the time frame that I'm doing updates, well, I'm going to give those a little more attention. Does that make sense? So try to do those at the same time each week. It just makes the file change notifications a little easier to deal with. The other recommendation I have is waiting a couple of weeks after a major core release before I update sites to the latest version of WordPress. That's for major core releases. Minor updates happen automatically, as is the WordPress default. I'll also wait to update large plugins like WooCommerce. Any large plugin that has third-party add-ons, if that core plugin has a major change, you probably want to wait a little bit just to make sure nothing is going to break. If you're supporting WooCommerce sites, a link that you need to have is the WooCommerce developer blog. They give you a great overview of every WooCommerce release because you can't tell if the WooCommerce release is a major release from the version numbers anymore. They've gotten away from that for some reason. I hate when they did that, but just because it looks like it's a major version doesn't necessarily mean it is with WooCommerce. So you can follow along there. And of course, stay current on WordPress security news. We have great blog posts on that. There's a security category on the iThemes blog. I've given you a link to that. There's a weekly vulnerability report. And then, of course, once a month, I do a WordPress news roundup, and we spend a lot of time talking about security-related issues. Okay, that brings us to the end of my handout. I realize I rushed there toward the end, but that gives us about 10 minutes here for Q&A. All right, so I see a couple of questions on the screen right now. And if you have questions that I've missed, please drop in those questions in the chat room now. In the meantime, I'm going to drop in a few links here. There's the link to the doc that we've just been looking at in case you missed that. Here is the link to the survey about iThemes security. We'd love to have your opinion, and we will send you swag if you complete that survey. And finally, if you'd like to give iThemes security a testimonial, you can email at that link, and we will not only send you some swag for your testimonial, but also give you a back link. Okay, questions. Sue is asking, when you do updates on Sundays, that means you don't use the version management and security. So I use version management for the vulnerability part of it. So if iThemes Security Site Scan, which runs twice a day automatically, with the version management feature under Site Scan checked, it will automatically apply updates when a vulnerability is found, right? But I don't allow iThemes Security to just automatically update themes and plugins, period. I want to watch what updates are happening. So does that answer your question, Sue, or was there more of a nuance to the question that I missed? Sue said, so I don't update plugins, etc. with it. No, I don't. I do have it running on WP Nathan because it's really just a demo site and there's nothing there that's going to break. So it works great and it'll automatically update everything. But I want to, for client sites that we manage, I want to make sure there aren't any problematic plugins that need to update. All right. Other questions in the chat room? William is asking, is there a toolkit discount? Christian maybe can speak to that. I don't believe there's a toolkit discount right now. There are toolkit discounts from time to time. Let's see. Question from John M. Dropbox. Does the size of those deleted backups count against the total Dropbox size? No. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, it's deleted, so it doesn't count against your storage quota. So that's why I've moved to Dropbox. It's a wonderful thing. Let's see. Manu, Kristen just updated the Disaster 40 coupon to include the toolkit. Well, that's a deal, y'all. The toolkit rarely hits a 40% discount. So if you want the toolkit, that is everything iThemes offers, including the Cadence theme and all the Cadence plugins and Restrict Content Pro and all the RCP plugins. It also includes a premium membership in iThemes training, so you get really cool premium training, including office hours with me once a week. All right, so toolkit is 40% off through tomorrow. Okay, let's see. Manu, In the first hour, you mentioned as a selling point to mention to clients that you own your hosting platform versus shared. Do you suggest hiring dedicated servers, hosting plans instead? So Manu, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there, but I think what you're asking is, should you have your own server if you're going to offer hosting plans? If there's more nuance to that, please correct me in the chat. So yeah, I recommend. Here's the thing. Every website needs hosting, right? Every website needs to be hosted. So why not make profit by reselling hosting? Depending on your ability, you might use a dedicated server or a VPS, or you might buy a block of managed WordPress accounts, like with Nexus, for example, which is a sister company to iThemes. Depending on the level of tech you want to get into in the hosting platform. I have a dedicated server with Liquid Web that's a WHM cPanel server because we know how to do that stuff. There are things that we have to do that are handled for you under managed WordPress plans. So my point is, you should have a hosting platform that you can resell to your clients because there's money to be made there. Plus, they're going to call you anyway with the hosting problems. So you might as well make money on the hosting as well as the WordPress management. There was also a question in the first hour from someone about do care plans include content changes or support? And that's a great question. And I asked that to pause until now. So I do include 2 fast tasks in each care plan. Fast task is something that we can get in and out of in 15 minutes, small changes like copy and paste this blog post, change this picture, add this staff profile, add this whatever, just quick things. If they want more than that, then we'll negotiate the price of the care plan. For example, we have a client that is, they want us to update their podcast link on the website every week. So their care plan costs more, and we basically customize the price of the plan to include whatever additional work that they'd want us to do. All right. Other questions about care plans or iThemes, using iThemes products in care plans? So John is asking specific questions about iThemes Pro to worried about traffic out of Ukraine, Russia being targeted. So, I mean, the basic settings in iThemes security are going to be helpful. You might also want to be sure that any site that's, you could put it behind Cloudflare as well. There's nothing specific, in other words, that I think you need to do. But that's a good question for iThemes security support if you have concerns. All right. Any final questions before we wrap things up? I see some questions over in GoToWebinar. Nath is asking, how do you manually run a file change check? I don't believe you can run that manually. It runs on a schedule. There may be a way to do. If there's a way to do it manually, I'm not aware. So I would recommend sending in a ticket and ask. And also, what is a good WAF, which is a web application firewall, to run with iThemes? I think the Cloudflare is going to be a good option for you there. David is asking, are today's sessions going to be posted for viewing? Yeah, David, if you will go to ithemes.com/chat, below the chat room, there is a button that says watch the replays. And all the replays are posted there. Let's see. Connie is asking, how long are the videos going to be up for? Kristen, are you going to change that link or remove those anytime soon? I mean, I imagine they're going to be there for a while. I don't think we have plans to delete the videos. They'll be there until next year. Okay. Heather, will the 6 slides be, so all the slides, this is the replay page. And as you scroll down, you can view the slides and the transcript right below the videos. So everything is here. Kristen has all these loaded up nice and pretty for us. And I'll have today's up here in the next hour or two. Sal, can we use that coupon to renew the toolkit? Unfortunately, the discounts are good for new purchases only. All right. Any final questions before we wrap this up? Really appreciate everybody being here. Great questions today and throughout this event. If you enjoyed this event, again, we do free training around WordPress things all the time. I would invite you to sign up for our news roundup, which is coming up on Tuesday. This is one of my favorite webinars every month. Yeah, we look at all the news that's happened in the last 30 days around WordPress, and we bring that to you. So we do that each month. So join us. That's coming up Tuesday. All right, that's going to do it, folks. Thanks again for hanging out with us throughout Disaster Week. Hopefully you learned a lot of things about security, and you are now even better equipped to create and sell care plans to your clients. My name is Nathan Ingram, and from everybody here at iThemes, have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday on iThemes Training, where we go further together.